Hello and welcome to the Help Me Understand podcast. Help Me Understand is a weekly podcast that explores the context behind the things that we experience from day to day, with topics ranging from personal development to parenting to health and fitness and a whole lot more. Join me, your host, J.K. McLeod, as I share my thoughts and host conversations that are meant to encourage you to say, help me understand, in an effort to add perspective to the things we experience in everyday life. All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number 203 of Help Me Understand, where we are going to talk about why it makes sense to still train your abs, even though you may not be able to see them right now. So before getting into today's episode, I first, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You have no shortage of podcasts that you can listen to, content that you can consume. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. I would ask that you could do me one favor, and that would be to share this episode with a friend, a family member, someone that you know at your gym, maybe with a complete stranger. Anybody that you think would potentially benefit from hearing this particular episode once you've listened all the way through, just going to ask you to do me one favor and pass it on to them. That is how we grow the show. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Today is a Tuesday episode, which means that on Tuesdays, we do something that is fitness training adjacent related. And today speaks directly to training your abs. And instead of specifically saying abs, I'm actually going to move the language more into the arena that I typically talk about, which is going to be training your core. Now, I initially started out with saying training your abs because that's primarily how people will refer to their midsection. And that's actually one of the first things that I want to bring up is that when we talk about your core is more than just your abs, your abdominals, your midsection. So your core is the entire support system for your body. So it includes your abdominals, your lower back, your obliques, and even some deeper muscles that basically like wrap around your spine and your pelvis. So when you hear myself or another trainer, I was going to say another well-trained trainer, refer to your core, they're talking about more than just your abdominals. So that's one thing that I want to get out there right off the bat. So again, and I jotted this down so I could remember to cover the whole thing. Your core is going to include your abs, lower obliques, and lower back, and then muscles that wrap all the way around your spine and your pelvis. So there's a lot going on there. And your core is more than just for show, too. The primary function for your core is to help with things like balance, with breathing, with posture, and literally just about like every single movement that you make is supported by having a strong core. That's one of the main things that really inspired me to do this particular episode, because it's fairly common to get questions about what can I do to train my abs? What can I do so that I can see my abs? Or something that has kind of picked up more steam is somebody will reach out and say, I know that abs are made in the kitchen, which what they're essentially saying is, I know that nutrition is going to be the primary component for being able to see my abs. And then they follow up with, but how can I train so that I can see my abs? And so then I just go back to reiterate, well, you started off on the right track, like I'm totally on the right path here, was saying that being able to actually see your abdominal muscles is going to primarily be a function of nutrition and the percentage of body fat that you have in that particular area. And if you have time and have not listened to a previous episode that I did talking about the difference between visceral fat and subcutaneous fat, and also just the understanding that you can't tell body fat where to come off of. You can listen to a previous episode where I talked about body fat, and then also another episode that I did that indirectly talks about that when I talked about TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, because getting into a caloric deficit is not just as simple as moving more and eating less. There's a bit more to it. So with that, let's get back to this. So what I did was I jotted down here, one, two, three, I jotted down 4 reasons why you should train your core and why it's about more than just aesthetics and having a 6-pack that shows. I will take a quick aside here to give you some context on an additional piece other than questions that I get asked that inspired this particular topic, because I was working on putting some content together for Instagram, and I'm going to post that most likely this week, or it might actually go out with this episode. But I was putting some snippets together and of some workouts, and I was noticing, like, man, no matter what, I do still do specific core exercises. And maybe even in this episode, I'll get into a couple of suggestions for just some simple, basic like template that you can kind of follow for core training. But in looking at the different snippets and things that I was posting for or pulling together for this reel, I was thinking to myself, man, I wonder if there are people out there who, unless they specifically are in a deficit or specifically in fat loss or specifically trying to see their abdominals, if they're truly training their core with regularity, training their abs with regularity. I can say with extreme confidence that anyone who's doing any of my group programs or any of my one-on-one clients are in fact still consistently doing core training. And when I say core training, I mean like direct targeted core training, along with the fact that when you properly perform many movements, especially many compound movements like squats, deadlifts, rows, and presses, when you properly perform those movements, they do involve indirectly making sure that you are what we call bracing and engaging your core in order to perform the movement properly. So you indirectly are also training the core with doing those. However, what I'm talking about as far as like direct core work, excuse me, is things like reverse crunches, serratus crunches, all sorts of crunches, also V-ups, and then lots of loaded carries and rotations and twists, so different things like that, wood chops, and we'll get into that possibly just to end this episode. So let's get into 4 reasons why training your core is about more than just the aesthetics. So the first piece is that focusing on training your core can help you protect your back and just overall your joints. So when you do have targeted core training, you will be able to improve your ability to have your core support your spine. And that in turn then will start to help reduce different types of things like aches and pains that can kind of happen. So in each of these, I'll try and give you a real life example. So for a very, very common example that I will hear from folks is they kind of tweak their back when they've been standing up, and then they bend over like to pick something up. Or sometimes if they've been sitting for an extremely long time, they just feel really, really stiff. That sometimes is because that particular individual has not consistently trained their core. So when you do have a solid core, it can give your body the stability that it needs in order to actually move in I hesitate to say pain-free way. We'll just say it can help to minimize some of the pain that potentially can come from normal day-to-day scenarios, like, again, bending over to pick something up or being seated for a long amount of time. So when I think about my clients that I know based on the jobs that they have, whether we're talking like they're sitting at a desk or sitting in a conference room, sitting in meetings, sitting at their desk doing work, teachers who actually teachers are kind of on their feet a decent amount of time, but so that's not a great example. But anybody who's sitting most of the day there, or also folks that are doing work outside of say they're like a professional occupation, they are the primary caregiver in the home. So they are potentially moving, like driving all over the place, especially if you have active kids that are involved in activities and things like that, any sort of extracurriculars. You likely are spending a decent amount of time in a vehicle, driving them back and forth to different things, then spending a decent amount of time sitting in bleachers or stands or auditoriums or arenas, whatever the case may be. So when you are finding yourself that being part of your lifestyle, more often than not, it's an even bigger reason why, in order to combat what can easily become an issue with soreness and pain and different things like that, why you want to make sure that you are including core training. So that's reason number one, where core training is about more than aesthetics. All right. Bullet point number two I've got for you here. You should train your core for more than just aesthetics because it will help you stay balanced and also stay in control. So your core also helps stabilize your body. So an example that I want to give you is if you were thinking about like stepping off of a curb. So you're or going down, taking a big step down. Or let's say that you need to reach up for something like that's on a really tall shelf, or you happen to be walking and you're about to trip and you catch yourself before you actually fall on the ground. Your core is actually what keeps you steady and can prevent those little like stumbles, trips, and falls from actually happening. So you can very quickly balance and control and stabilize yourself so that you don't actually take that particular fall. When you're moving in a lot of different directions, so an example that I'll give you is, in addition to coaching, I also work in a retail store environment. And that often involves every now and then needing to jump into particular situations with helping out in like a warehouse type environment to move a particular product to get it ready to go out, or needing to like climb up a ladder to go grab something to help somebody out. And because I do train my core, I'm confident. I'm not saying that I'll never hurt myself because I'm sure it'll happen at some point. However, I'm confident that I've done what I can to try to put myself in a position where simple movements like climbing up ladders, like lifting up boxes, like needing to bend down in order to, grab something off a bottom shelf or a top shelf, whatever the case may be. I've moved my body through those planes of motion, and also I've trained my core so that my core is stabilized and allows me to still feel a good sense of balance and stabilization when I do those things. Then also, if you, what I want you to picture is, say that you are grabbing 2 to 3 boxes and they don't stack easily on each other. So they're like 2 to 3 boxes that are different sizes. So you're carrying them in your arms. One may be a little bit heavier than the other. When you think about that, that means you're going to need to do something to kind of balance it out, or else you're just kind of I was going to say weeble wobbling from left to right, like a teeter totter, like a seesaw almost. Your core, bracing your core and stabilizing is what helps you maintain balance and keep those boxes balanced in your hands as you walk forward. And then also, if I were to ever get like tripped, well, one, if you trip me, like it's on. Two, if I were to ever get tripped or trip over something, there's a good chance that if I have developed that balance and that control, I'd be able to quickly recover before hitting the ground. All right. So that was bullet point number two, staying balanced and in control. All right. We just got 2 more to go through here. Bullet point number 3, just generally, and this is pretty closely related to the previous point, but I just really wanted to bring this home more from just like an everyday, like longevity, and also a longevity standpoint, is that I do believe that consistently training your core, again, remember that we're talking your core, including everything from like abs, your back, your lower back, your obliques, like the whole area. I do believe that training your core helps to make everyday tasks much easier. It literally like powers everything that you do, whether it's, again, like bending down, reaching up, twisting. So I was trying to think of particular scenarios where your core comes into play and you may not necessarily always think about it. But things like the classic is like being able to carry all the groceries in one trip. So yes, that is a function of grip strength, depending on how you do it. Because I don't know if is anybody else like me where you string them all along your arm too, where you're almost like literally cutting off your circulation. However, that's an example where people feel like it's all about grip strength and then really having a strong upper body. It also is about having core strength because you need to be able to balance. Then also things like lifting up a suitcase and putting it into an overhead bin for those of us who are thinking, who are parents, and then are looking forward to potentially at some point being grandparents or being uncles or aunts, whatever the case may be. Then thinking about as we start to get older, being able to maintain a level of movement that makes it a bit easier and reduces the risk of injury with playing with our younger kids and being in a position to do that. One of the examples that I hopefully will never forget is a few years ago when I took my son Mace, who at this point, let me think. I know I can picture the exact scenario. It was at a park, and I'd say he was about 8 or 9. No, yeah, I'd say he was about 9 or 10 years old. And we had dropped his sister off to do something and needed to hang out in the area for about an hour. And there was a park nearby. So we brought his baseball glove and my glove and then a ball. And at the time, he was starting to learn how to pitch. So I told him that we could go to this park and I would play catcher and he could pitch to me. And I truly hope I never forget this because he said, "Hey, are you sure you're going to be able to do that? Because I know when so and so," because sometimes somebody else would do that with him, like another family member, and say, "Well, I will when so and so." When I ask them to play catcher for me, they tell me that they can't because it hurts their body too much. And I was like, "Oh, my guy, like this is what I train for." So I was like, not only can I squat down and play catcher, but I started like trying to show off and show him like how deep I could squat. He, of course, didn't care. He just wanted to know, like, can I go ahead and pitch? So I just think about that though, and that brings into play not just core, it also brings into play mobility and a few other aspects like that. However, I do think that that is something that many parents can relate to, just wanting to be able to, for as long as possible, at the drop of a hat, which I don't know where that phrase came from. However, at the drop of a hat, be able to, if one of the kids wants to go, play a game or run or whatever, play baseball, that you'd be able to do that. So I think that is something too. Just generally, it makes everyday tasks easier for the most part when you do train your core. And then last but certainly not least is focusing on training your core will help you breathe better and then just as we've talked about, generally move better. So when you do have a strong core, it helps with your overall posture. It also will help with your overall endurance, and it can even help with your breathing. So if you can think of a scenario where you possibly have felt out of breath, where you're walking like up a flight of stairs, some people will automatically go to, oh man, my cardio sucks. Like, and yes, your cardio probably does suck if you get winded walking up a flight of stairs. However, to be encouraging here, which I usually try to be, all is not lost. These are things that you can improve. So you can improve your cardiovascular strength. What sometimes people are not thinking about is there is an aspect of core development that helps with things like walking up a flight of stairs. So strengthening your core can actually make breathing and just overall movement a lot more efficient. So if you have the opportunity to be able to do breath work, what you're going to find is that a lot of breath work is about control and really being able to understand, and it's almost like in the minimal time that I've spent doing some breath work, I liken it to mind muscle connection, which is also a previous episode. shameless plug, mind muscle connection for your core is kind of how I will describe breath work. So really getting an understanding of how to control your breath. The core your core development goes hand in hand with that. So by working on focusing on building up your core, you will also, in my opinion, feel like you can breathe better and then just overall move better. All right. So I'll review these one more time here and then start to close things out and give you a quick little, like 30-second snippet on how you can basically move in three directions that will help you train your core consistently, or four directions, I should say. So again, the 4 bullet points that I've got for you here on why training your core is about more than aesthetics. Number 1, it helps you protect your back and your joints. Number 2, it helps you stay balanced and in control. Number 3, can help make everyday tasks a lot easier. And number 4, you can breathe better. And then overall, as we've talked about, you can move better. So the bottom line here is that developing your core, training your abs, which is a part of your core. Hopefully we still agree on that from the beginning. It's not specifically just about a flat stomach. It's about being able to move better, feel stronger, and then hopefully living pain-free or reducing the possibility of living in pain. So that is why I am a huge proponent of training your core with the same level of consistency, whether you are currently in like, I want to see my abs season or not. And plot twist, I myself am currently not in I can see my abs season at all. And I'm okay with that. And I'm still continuing to train my core because I'm not in a specific caloric deficit right now. I am very much in maintenance at this point. So I don't have a specific expectation of being able to see my abdominal muscles at this point. I am purely continuing to train my core because at the very, well, pardon the pun, at the very core of it, I understand that it's about much more than the aesthetics. There will definitely come a point in time at some point, maybe this year, maybe not, where maybe I want to focus on going into a deficit. So maybe I have more of an aesthetic goal. Right now is not that particular time. So there we go. All right. So I promised that I would, finish out with just a quick little template. And when I say template, just a quick little blurb here that you can use, just a quick way to focus on training your core. So basically what I will do is I will have folks move their upper body towards their lower body. So here's the way that I frame it, and we're all adults here. So if you giggle at the names that I give these things, then that's cool. It's okay. So in one of the movements, you want to move knees towards nipples. So you want to be crunching. These are basically different types of crunches. So you want to crunch the knees towards the nipples. So basically it's your chest moving towards your knees. So those could be things like serratus crunch or just a traditional abdominal crunch. Sit-ups, not as much. So yeah, serratus crunch or just a traditional abdominal crunch. So that's knees to nipples. Then the opposite direction is nipples to knees. So we've basically got upper abs and the upper portion of the abdominals, lower portion of the abdominals. If we're going specifically for abdominals here, then I would train knees to nipples. So that would be things like a reverse crunch, or you may see like lying leg raises or hip raises. And one of the main things with that is when you are doing hip raises, and I've seen people do them, and I believe I've posted this on your Instagram before. I can't remember if it was just in my client group, where sometimes people are doing like the knee raises and they're on like I call it the Roman chair device. So they're sitting on that, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Like there's pads underneath your elbows and they're raising their knees. You want to make sure that if you're doing that, that's an example of knees towards nipples. So you want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're raising your knees enough so that you're breaking the hip crease. So what I'm talking about with that, and if you go online, you'll be able to see this, like just look up knee raise with hip raise or something like that. And you'll see the difference between if you simply are just raising your knees to be parallel with your hips, you're basically just working your hips. But if you raise them above, like you actually try and move your knees as close as you can get them to your nipples, then you actually will be working the lower portion of your abdominals. So again, knees to nipples, nipples to knees, and then some sort of a rotation or twisting type movement, like Russian twists, oblique twists, side bends. You can do rotations and chops. Those are all good for that. So those are specifically abdominal focused, like really focusing on abdominals. If we're talking overall core, additional things that I like to make sure are in there that would help train core stability, remembering that it's more than just about your abdominals. Carries all day long. So farmers carries, overhead carries, isometric holds. So if you take something like, one of my favorites is taking 2 kettlebells and what we call like shoulder rack or front rack kettlebells, or you can front rack a barbell, almost as if you're about to do a front squat, and then bracing there. Or holding that there and then bracing your midsection. That can also be something that's really good for developing core stability and also just really learning how to breathe and brace. That can be really helpful with that. So I'm a big fan of things like that. So hopefully that helps a bit. So basically, again, to close that one out, if you're training the abdominals specifically, you want to move knees to nipples. You want to move your nipples towards your knees. And then you want to rotate and or twist. And then for overall core, things like any sort of loaded carries, any sort of isometric holds, that's where you're just standing in place, marching too. So you've got carries where you grab, like, say, a couple of dumbbells and you're walking, but they need to be heavy so that you're needing to brace in order to make sure you're not doing like the I'm a little teapot, tipping left and right as you walk. But you can also do a standing in place farmer march where you're working high knees. So you're just marching your knees up and down as you try to hold on to the dumbbells or kettlebells or plates at your sides, like a suitcase carry. So that is just a basic little framework that hopefully you can find helpful. All right. So with that, that is going to close out today's episode. And as always, the Help Me Understand podcast is sponsored by Feed Your Habits. Feed Your Habits is apparel for people who understand that habits don't just grow on their own. They need to be fed. So head to feedyourhabits.com to check out the line of t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, joggers. I think that covers everything that we've got going on there right now. We just released a new hoodie, which actually I have on if you're watching on YouTube. So I have the new hoodie on. It's called the Move as One hoodie. That is available right now. And you can get a discount of 10% off using my code. It's all caps JKFYH. Again, go to feedyourhabits.com. The link will be in the show notes. Use my promo code JKFYH. That'll get you 10% off and also free shipping inside of the United States. All right. So I believe that covers everything for today's fitness and training adjacent episode. If you do have ideas for future things that you'd like me to cover, fitness related or otherwise, there is a link in the show notes. You can fill that form out and send that idea into me. You can also just DM me on Instagram, Coach JK McLeod, MCLEOD. And that's going to wrap it up. Episode 203 in the books. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.